For becoming a product manager, 100% don't do an MBA. It's the costliest way to become a product manager. The role product manager might not exist in its title after 10 years.
In this episode, we dive deep into the art and science of product management with the Swagwala PM, as known here on YouTube, or Shravan. From moving beyond just cracking the PM interviews to mastering the craft of building impactful products, Shravan shares profound insights on why being a generalist often outweighs being a specialist, how to embrace failure as a stepping stone to growth, the importance of blending emotional intelligence with technical skills, why product thinking goes far beyond features and roadmap. Whether you're an aspiring PM or a seasoned professional, this conversation is packed with timeless wisdom and actionable takeaways.
Can aspiring PMs move beyond just cracking the interview to truly mastering the craft?
Sure. So I think one of the things that PMs generally have a notion about is this role is not new. It's an old role, right? Where there was somebody who could take care of the entire consumer life cycle, right? Now that's a hard thing to do because the consumer life cycle is just not product. Right? It's a lot about how do you market your product, how do you push it out to the customers, how do you do the right sales, how do you build the right culture, how do you ship out something in an agile manner. So you need to be good at a lot of concepts, right? And then the beauty of this thing is how do you become good at a lot of concepts, right? If you really want to be good at craft of building stuff, because I'm not saying product management as just going into an interview and cracking an interview, that's the first part. True product management is that you're building stuff and you're solving user problems, right? And the funny part is that there is a very famous Oscar Wilde quote. He says, consistency is the ornament of the unimaginative, right? So again, for unimaginative people who are not like gifted like Messi or somebody like that, we have to try a lot of problems and be okay with failure, right? The fundamental problem with most people in PM roles is whenever they reach a certain stage or they entering in a role, they are afraid of failure, right? And if you essentially pick different concepts and keep applying them again and again in different situations and different problems, maybe solving a product sense question, right? Maybe going out and having a conversation with the product leader, maybe building a thesis about a product, right? You have to be okay with a lot of time being wrong, right? See, you are building stuff. And what is the tenet of a building? They fall. So you have to be okay with that, right? So if you're okay with that and you consistently delve into the craft of doing something meaningful again and again, like starting from a very small thing, looking at a problem, dissecting it from different versions, right? Not considering every opinion to be not aligning to you, having the fundamental tenacity to understand divergent opinions, right? And then applying them in real time in your life, in whatever decisions that you make, you slowly and slowly become a better generalist. See, again, today is not a world of specialists. At least that's my opinion, right? So today is a world where you have to be good generalists. And what do you mean by good generalist is not that you're good in one thing and remaining your jack of all trades. You have to be 10% in all of the other trades also, right? You might be 1% in writing a PRD or crafting that one perfect thing for you, but you have to be great and in top 10% of all other crafts, design, engineering, and things like that. And in order to do that, just pick up problems, try to solve them, showcase your work, get as much feedback, build less ego, right? And that is where you will essentially be able to really appreciate the craft, that, oh wow, I was able to see this new problem in a very different way, right? Which others were not able to. I'll give you a very small example to this. And the example is, a lot of people ask me this, that quick commerce is booming. It's doing so well. People are raising billions of dollars. Shravan, what's the future of this? Right? Now, that's a very funny question to ask, because from a fundamental perspective of Zomato, Blinkit, and Zepto and these type of companies in India, which have raised like billions of dollars, they're doing phenomenally well, right? But what really happens when they go to tier 2 India and tier 3 India, where convenience is not big a factor? Will they work? Will they not work? Right? Now, that is where you make a lot of theses. That is where you essentially try to grab different opinions and say, maybe it works in certain pockets. Maybe you have to change your playbook. And that is how a PM really thinks, right? They don't think in zeros and ones. They play a lot in the gray, right? That maybe this opinion also makes sense. This opinion also. And eventually they have to boil down to a decision. That is correct, right? But they are okay with the fact that I might have known unknowns. I'm okay with that. I won't have unknown unknowns. So yeah, that's your answer. Yes.
What's your take about being a specialist?
See, being a specialist is a good thing as long as you can be like really good at it. Like really good at it is not like 90%. Really good is like 99.9%. right? That you have figured out that one thing that somebody else cannot do, right? And you're really good at it. You're abstracting out. And again, if you look at very, very focused tarike se, if you look at it in a very meaningful way, right? Even a specialist is a generalist in some ways. I'll give you an example. If you go deep into data science, right? Now, as you go deeper into data science, the branch essentially opens in a very horizontal way. You can do deep learning, you can do machine learning, you can do generative AI, right? You can do bunch of things, right? So over there also you have to play with multiple concepts, right? Even though the domain superficially might feel like it's just data science, right? So you have to abstract out some other concept and essentially apply it somewhere else. That's how LLMs came into the play. They realized that when they train a model essentially on a large amount of data, it was able to do something which it was not explicitly trained on. That's human brain behavior, right? So even if you want to become a generalist, sorry, a specialist, right, you will have to be meaningfully better than other people in that ecosystem. And if you're meaningfully better, that means in that very domain you can abstract out things which others can't. That is like the true essence of a generalist. So you might be a generalist at heart, but seemingly you are just doing one thing. So that's my view. Yeah.
I heard you once quoting Naval Ravikant about insects. Can you say this quote
Yes.
again?
Yes. Yes. So the quote is specialization is for insects, right? Why it essentially means that because we as humans, I think a lot of our systems, right? Because what we are essentially doing is building systems, right? Family as a system, focus as a system, right? Friends as a system, right? Career as a system, right? These are not systems which are like messy, mutually exclusive, and completely exhaustive. They have strong overlap. I'll give you an example. If you don't know how to manage a team, if you don't know how to build relationships, you might be the best product manager on the planet. You'll not ship out good products. As simple as that, right? So that means the shipping of your product is not just dependent on the code that you write. It's also dependent on how that code is written, how well it is thought about, how meaningfully people take it to themselves that it's a meaningful thing that they're doing, right? So logically, you have to become better at human principles by design. So if you're becoming better at human principles, then you're becoming better at design principles, then you're becoming better at product principles. That is what really makes you a very wise person. Again, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. These are two different things. Wisdom basically means good judgment in some scenario, right? In any arbitrary scenario, right? You're going there, your manager tells you, oh, we thought this product would work, but we are shelving it off. What do? Your team worked for 30 days on this. They burnt their midnight oil. What do? Right? How do you talk? That is where prudence comes in. And there is again a very famous quote by Mark Twain where he says, an ounce of prudence is greater than a pound of knowledge, right? And prudence basically means how do you talk, how do you respect yourself. And that's why I say evolution happens in all dimensions. It doesn't happen in one dimension that I become analytically better. That just means you have become skilled, but you have not evolved. If you really want to evolve, then you have to be better at looking at the world in a different way, right? And a lot of times it's not really about the solution, it's about how you look at the problem, how you look at the really the question, right? Like I'll give you a very good example. Let's assume, Mahmood, I would say the person who is taking my podcast is a dear friend of mine, right? That's also truth, right? And the other thing, the person who is taking a podcast is a LinkedIn acquaintance of mine. That's also true, right? But the first creates a sense of warmth, right? And you would probably go out of your way to do something meaningfully for me, and you build trust. Whereas I made the very same statements, both of them are true. One has more impact, one has less. So logically, it means that even the emotional dimension, right, which really makes us humans, that is where also the evolution of a product manager or a builder has to happen. If that doesn't, that's why you see legendary companies like people like Andy Grove. They were not just good technology leaders, they were extremely good people leaders. They had extremely high situational awareness, right? That this is what I have to do, this is where I have to apologize, this is where I made a mistake, right? And that is what really really transforms you as a good generalist. And when you become a good generalist, I think that is the place where you become wiser and wiser in life and you make better product choices. That's why you see like latent entrepreneurs who do second time, third time, they don't make the same mistakes that they did the first time. So yeah, makes sense.
You mentioned there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. How to gain more wisdom?
Yeah, makes sense. That's a very, very good question. See, there is again, I quote a lot of quotes. So again, a quote for you. So there is this again very nice quote by Oscar Wilde. He says that education is a beautiful thing. It teaches you a lot of things, but it teaches you one more thing, that everything that's worth teaching can never be taught, can be never be taught. So that's a very, very powerful thing that he says. So the best way to acquire wisdom, or that the allowance, is that stay move away from failure. Failure is just a milestone. You have to experience it. You have to try newer things in life. You learn something, take it without judgment, try it for a meaningful period of time. If it doesn't work, take the learnings, move out, right? The only way to become wise is to consistently interact more. That's why you see creators or builders, they build products, they ship something out, right? And then only they get feedback, good or most of the problems of most people are in their heads. They never go out. They're not real. They're just in their heads, right? And that is the way to become wise. So I will take a corollary to that question. People ask me, Shravan bhaiya, how do you essentially figure out the purpose in your life? It's very easy. People say this, that figure out your purpose. You'll never. So I said, dude, the only way to figuring out your purpose is go through enough shit in life. Go through enough shit and you will figure it out. And how does that happen? I'll give you an example. So to look at my reality, I start off as somebody who wanted to be a mathematician, wrote papers in number theory, right? Life had so that I did metallurgy from IIT, nothing to do with mathematics, right? But I love to teach even then, right? Became a product manager, built products, became a content creator, created content. Eventually, after 12 years of my life, I became a teacher again. That's the funny part of life, right? So the only way to figure out if you really are purposeful, and that it is a very similar question to asking, how do you figure out the right idea for your startup? One fine day it will just pop up in your head? Not really, right? The beautiful way of doing it is, there are a lot of like fires in your life, or a lot of like these small sparks in your life. You pick up a spark, say there's a cutoff, I'll try it for 6 months, give my honest 6 months to it. If it's meaningful, I'll continue it. If it's not meaningful, I'll leave it, I'll move to another spark. And if you do that consistently, eventually there will be a spark which will convert into a fire. And that is when you will figure out that, oh, this is what I want to do. You never get to know what you want in life, but you always get to know what you don't want in life, right? And you remove, and then you reach out to your. So that is how you become wiser. At least that's what I've thought. And there are meaningful ways to do it. You follow good people. You try to see what they have done. Read biographies. Again, I don't recommend business books. Business books are shit, right? I genuinely recommend. For me, the best way to learn about the nuances of human growth is look at biographies. Read biographies. You'll see the gray part of, like, Leonardo da Vinci was one of the greatest person, but simultaneously he also was gay, right? People don't talk about it, but it is true. It is there. So it is the nuance of human life, right, that tells you really how people think. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. Yes.
Any biographies that you recommend me reading?
100%. I think you can read the Walter Isaacson one about Leonardo da Vinci. I think you should also read there's this one which is on Nikola Tesla. And the one very not very famous one, I recommend that across. It is Beyond the Last Blue Mountain. It's on J.R.D. Tata, the only industrialist in India who got the Bharat Ratna. He was the uncle of Ratan Tata. So then the name of the book is Beyond the Last Blue Mountain. He became India's first private jet pilot also, right? And he was a French citizen who gave up his citizenship for the citizenship of India, right? So yeah, very beautiful. And there's another one on Howard Hughes. I don't know that there was a very famous book on Howard Hughes. So Howard Hughes was also a very famous eccentric guy, right? So eccentricity is a very good function of what people end to do in life. Now that might be a controversial statement to make, but then again, that is true. Yeah.
What's your take on whether an MBA is necessary for PMs and how else they can build their key capabilities?
Absolutely. So I think you should break it down that what an MBA does for you, right? And it's a very popular question to me also. I think I've spoken at a lot of places, but I really want to reiterate it for you, right? And any such experience, which is like a business management program or something like that, right, essentially helps you evolve in multiple dimensions of life, right? It gives you, let's try to deconstruct what an MBA does for you. It gives you a very good peer group, right? Because there are select people there. It gives you a structured environment to learn. That is the second thing that they do for you. The third thing it does for you is it probably gives you a certain amount of brand, right? And the fourth and the underrated thing about it, gives you a lot of drive. Because if there are 5 such people who are like eyeing for that McKinsey job, which pays them like $500,000, so you see that drive, right? You are a sum total of the people around you, right? Now, if all of these things essentially make you like a better person, right? And that experience helps you grow and think with prudence. And this is the word I keep using again and again. Prudence means good judgment, that okay, why this job would be good for me? Is it culturally very nice? Will I learn here? I am spending so much time. Will I grow every day? Right? If these kind of nuances start happening in you, then MBA is very useful, because it's making you a better person. Now break them these things again. You want, so what do you first want? You want a network, right? Pick that up, start writing on LinkedIn, start writing on X, start doing content on YouTube. You'll start building a network, right? So you kind of solve for that. The second thing that you do is probably a structured environment to learn. Again, there are a lot of communities all across the globe, where people are learning product, building products, right? And not just product communities, there are also Web3 communities, crypto communities, right? Where people are shipping out newer and newer things. What is the third thing? If you have an influence, right? Like for example, if you have X amount of followers, right? Who listen to you, who essentially do things, right? Who give you feedback, right? That also is a very good sense of credibility, right? That there is a certain influence that you're bringing across, and it's valuable from a B2C, B2B, and even from your growth perspective. And the last part is that the kind of people and a network does that, right? And essentially, if you have that sense, so if you can abstract out those skills that you get from the program and kind of find parallels for it in your real life, right? For becoming a product manager, 100% don't do an MBA. It's the costliest way to become a product manager, right? If you really want to become a PM, if that's your goal, that no, I want to become a product manager, and that's why I want to do an MBA from IIM or from Stanford or from some other place. But if you really want to thrive and see that it's a paradigm shift in the way you think, in the people that you interact with, in the way you look at an outlook of life, in the way you explore newer experiences, it's a phenomenal thing to do. I myself, for a certain while, was thinking that I'll go to GSB and do an MBA. At least I'll apply for it, right? That was the thought. But again, if for most people it is easy to do an MBA because it's just money that brings you all of those things, right? It's money and a certain amount of acumen that you give your GRE and GMAT and do things like that, right? But the other side might not cost you a lot of money, but it'll cost you a lot of time, right? Building that network, standing out, doing those things. So people typically choose the easy path because money is something that people can still earn and do back. But this takes a lot of effort. You have to wake up every day. It doesn't have like a dopamine hit that you put out a LinkedIn post when you have like 1,000 followers and nobody likes your post. It does not have that dopamine hit. You have to get up again and do it again. It's like gym, right? One place you're buying the best trainer, maybe by money. The other place you're saying, no, I'm building my body myself. I'm going to the gym every single day. So both can really work. So again, people typically take my statement out of context. I say doing an MBA is a great thing as long as you do it for the experience, as long as you want to grow, right? And becoming a PM is a byproduct of it. But if you're doing it just to become a product manager, then it's the most expensive way to do it. And you're not even really enjoying the core quality of a business management program. Yeah.
And how do you approach discovery to uncover the core problem rather than relying on initial assumptions?
Sure. So I think another very good insight on this that I've recently noticed is that true product experience are deeply rooted in anecdotal behaviors, right? They are not rooted in like statistics. Like I'll give you an example. If there's a tsunami and X number of people die, for most of the world, it's a statistic, right? For somebody who loses a dear one, it's a reality, right? So I think discovery has to be deeply rooted in what it changed for you. What did it change for me, right? When I'm doing this podcast, when I'm teaching this lecture, what is it doing for that one student that is sitting there, and does it really make improvements to his life or not, right? And that is where people really think that doing discovery at scale is a hard thing. Yes, it is a very hard thing. It is a very hard thing, right? Because the point is that people are not using just your product, they're using 10 other products in their phone, right? So they're not going to sit out and say that, oh, I'll give you deep, detailed feedback on this, right? So you have to follow the reverse process and kind of build a product of your own. So I typically ask this question, like if I ask, Ki, Mahmood, tell me the 5 good things that you like in a car. In most likelihood, you're going to tell me, oh, it has good mileage, it should look good, it should have good economy. But if I ask you a flip question, what did you not like in a Merc that you tried? You'll give me 50 things. Oh, I didn't like the boot space. I didn't like to rotate the steering wheel and things like that, right? What you typically do is figure out a target persona of yourself, right? And say that this is where I'm going to talk to very, very closely, right? And genuinely talk to, like invest time, right? and come up with a lot of solutions to the assumed problem that I have. That is the assumed problem. The moment anecdotally people are extremely happy, and one of the very good ways is they're willing to swipe their card, that is when you've really realized that you've hit the core of the problem. See, saying that I love your product, it's a great thing, right? But not swiping your card means nothing. So PMF is truly when people are willing to take out their credit card and they do like this on your. So discovery as a process is deeply rooted on how you figure out your target persona and spend considerable amount of time, because people are not good at giving you like deep detailed advice. They'll give you superficial things that, oh, I like this or I like that, and you have to be that person to come up from that advice and come up with what is the insight. Like I keep saying this, observations, insights come from observations, but not every not every observation is an insight, right? So insight is an observation, but every observation is not an insight, right? So you have to really move from observations to insights, and that can only happen when you consistently stay close to as a teacher. Like I'll give you an example. The reason Rethink Systems was able to build a decently strong community in India was because I was an educator myself, right? I'd spoken to like 10,000 students in over the last 4 or 5 years, right? In one way or the other. So I deeply knew what disturbed them, right? But if let's assume I am a person and one fine day I say I want to start an edtech company and have no clue about what my target audience is, and it seems lucrative because people are putting money there, right? It's not going to bring that kind of persistence. It's going to take you a lot of time to do that discovery, that what really ticks people. Yeah.
And how candidates who are applying for a PM position
Yes.
demonstrate an authentic product thinking and stand out from others.
Absolutely. So I think there are a bunch of ways you can break them down, right? One of the very good ways is that you start consistently writing, ship something out, right? I keep telling people, if you say things that I know something, it has to be visible when you're not there, right? So one of the very important ways for me to really figure out whether I was making sense to a lot of people was writing on LinkedIn. And one of the very real reasons of writing on LinkedIn was because it had constraints. It told me write between 1300 characters or 3000 characters or whatever that number is, right? And I used to reverse and write it down and really see that is it resonating with people or not. And this acted as like a proof of work. Oh, this is what he talks about. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is a very important thing that you have to do is pick up problems. Like there is this approach that I keep telling people: do a pre-interview assignment. What I mean by do a pre-interview assignment is, let's assume you want to go to Swiggy or maybe Zomato or maybe Kareem for that matter in the Middle East, right? So if you pick up a problem for Kareem, really solve it, put it on social media, make it enterprising so that it gets eyeballs, right? And say, oh wow, this guy. It tells two things to the recruiter. One, that he's so passionate that we didn't even tell him to do this, right? But he did it. And the second thing it does is, a resume is just a bunch of highlights. I don't know how you think. It also, if you grab my attention, I say, oh wow, he thought about this feature which probably nobody. How did carpool really works in Dubai? It works very differently from India, right? How would it work, right? So that this is a second. And the third approach that I keep telling people that is also very critical is, please start building your network, right? That's a very strong thing. And all three of them really fall into something called the product portfolio, right? You make something like a portfolio. And again, the goal of a portfolio, again, I started this thing as a portfolio and people do the same ghisi-piti case studies. Ghisi-piti is a Hindi word that it's like the same old rugged case studies that, oh, I want to improve this feature, I want to improve. No, the goal of a case study is to essentially give some insight so that the interviewer, the person who is reading it, feels like, oh, I took away something from it. I took away something. Oh, I remember. Like, if you really look at my content, no, even if they don't look at my product management stuff, oh, he's that funny guy who writes humor on LinkedIn, right? That's a way of mingling conversation, and that is where you stand out. Essentially, but again, it's a function of the same principle that I kept. It's consistency. If you're not consistent, it's not going to work. The philosophical thing that you have to remember is that people overestimate growth in short term and heavily underestimate in long term. It's like this, right? It took me 6 months to find my first viral content on LinkedIn, and I had written like 100 plus posts. Didn't work, right? But I still had to wake up every day. And eventually, over time, it allowed me to have a network. It allowed me to speak to you. In that sense, it allowed me to speak to so many people, build that credibility across, and that is how it happens. So, long answer short, Pick up any two, three things, be at it. Don't feel bad with failures. Be okay with divergent feedback. Consistently keep shipping. There will be a point when your content will start making sense to you. It'll give you a lot of value in that sense. And then you will essentially move across industries also. Because if I make a view about fintech today and say that Shravan thinks about it like this, I think happily people will be happy to talk to me about those opinions. Yeah.
Let's say a PM who recently landed a job. In their first 90 days as a PM, what steps they need to do to build trust and credibility in their team?
Absolutely. So I think the one thing they should not do, first I'll speak about that, is don't start learning skills mindlessly. That go inside, oh, I want to learn SQL. I want to learn design, how it happens. Oh, I want to learn how analytics pipelines work. Oh, I want to learn machine learning. A lot of PMs do that. They go inside and they say, no, I'm a PM. I should know how to pull out the data. I should know. And the second bad thing that you can also do is go into your meeting and you're like 7 days into the ecosystem and start suggesting features. Oh, why can't we solve it like this? Why can't we solve it like that? Now, that does the fundamental things that you have to realize is that problems lead to skills. Skills don't lead to problems. I'll give you an example. For example, you are a company who essentially creates landing pages. You're a PM for Wix.com, for all that I care, right? And now you realize that the landing pages that we create typically don't convert in a certain industry at the industry average of 10%, right? Now, this is a problem statement. You realize that, oh, we are making landing pages. We are saying that these are great landing pages for content creators and stuff like that. But the typical industry average is 10%. Is it really on my user how he creates the landing page, or are we giving them those features that they really need to do that? So what you essentially do is you go and look at all the layers. You say, are there enough design elements that we're putting across? Is the latency a problem? Right? Are our APIs giving us responses the same way? Right? Third, are we communicating the features in the most logical way? Now, if you do all of this and then you realize, oh, design is a problem, right? Then you learn design and then you say, oh, now I want to learn the principles of design because I know that this is a problem for my customer, and that is where conceptual design, information design, interaction design, visual design, all of these layers start coming in, right? But it doesn't start the way that you go first day and you say, oh, I'll sit with the designer, I'll create a wireframe. Doesn't work. So the first thing that you should do, at least as a PM, is go and just speak to your team, right? Happily, if your manager allows you to be part of a mid-sprint, great. Just be part of the sprint, just listen, right? And go and essentially just let other people speak. Sometimes the best way to gain control is to give control, right? So other people, let them speak, put their thoughts across, note them down, write it on a piece of paper, and then go back and do your discovery and come up with good questions and say, oh, you said this yesterday, I did my discovery, am I right? Right? And slowly and steadily you build some kind of meaningful connection in the team, right? Because that's the first thing. The second thing that you should also do, I think it's a very important thing, is that pick your battles very, very, very wisely. If you don't know how to prioritize, what I mean by that is, for example, a lot of PMs do also this. They are like super bent on doing things, and one fine day something breaks and you're new into the organization. You just pick up your call and you call your developer at 12 a.m. at 12 p.m. at night and say that pick and fix this for me. Again, doesn't work, right? You really have to really understand that devs will only, or other people will only respect you when you respect their lives, and realize that where you have to stand for them, where you don't have to stand for them, right? So if you stand for them in situations which are small trivial situation, and you can tie that to the business objective, great. Because one fine day when you really need their help and you call them at 2 a.m. at night, they'll pick up your phone and they'll actually do it because they know that you fought for them at like 20 other places. That's the second thing. Fight for the team. Think of a team as an entity, right? Don't think of PM as an entity, right? And the third and the most important piece, which people generally forget, right, while they are like in an organization, and I think that is super, super meaningful, is that as a PM, you also have to really understand that from a team dynamic perspective, what you have and what you don't have. What I mean by that is, one of my managers used to say this: it's not about what you've got, it's what you make of what you've got, right? And that is where you start realizing that a lot of your strengths is interdependent on other people. You cannot do everything yourself. PMs end up doing everything. Oh, if the data analyst is not working with me, I'll go and just pull out the data. Doesn't work. In the long work, you have to make it work. You have to build that relationship with people, right? So First, understand your consumer very well in the first 90 days, like at the back of your mind. After 90 days, you should realize I am the consumer. If somebody had to ask me, Shravan, what does your product do? You should be able to do that. The second thing, stand for your team, right? And understand their strengths well. And the third thing that you have to understand is where you have to build cross-functional dependencies and then figure out what are the problems in that ecosystem and move to the skills part that I want to learn data science or whatever and whatnot, right? Yeah.
And how can PMs use wireframes or sketches to clarify product decisions without intruding on design?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that you have to really understand is that from a design language perspective, PMs generally operate in the first two layers of design, which is generally the conceptual and the information design, right? That is where wireframes truly help. What I mean by that is conceptual design basically means like if I ask Mahmood, tell me if you have to make a food delivery app, what would you first see? And he says, oh, the first thing I want to see is what are the restaurants near me. Now conceptually that comes to you, right? Or if I tell you, Mahmood, make me a maps type of an application, right? So you will say, oh, if it's a maps type application, it should have like a map like diagram on which people are essentially. That's the conceptual layer, which you can kind of make on a handkerchief and say, this is how I think the product is, right? Then you essentially move towards the information layer of it, where you typically say, I want the first user should see this, then this, then this, then this, because I think this is the flow of information that the person wants. Like, for example, you go to any website like Skyscanner, like a lot of people ask me this question, why do all of these OTA over the counter travel websites, right? So they have the same UX that you go and from to a number of people and search, right? They have the same damn UX. Go wherever in the world. The reason is because that's the information category. Because anybody who wants to travel says that I want to go from here and these many people, and then he wants to see the price, right? Similarly, that is where the role of a PM should end. Practically end, right? Say that this is my conceptual layer, this is my information layer, this is how the wireframe really looks. Because in a wireframe, there is no clickability. You don't typically talk about like you click and what happens, right? Then the value is in the design part, the UX, that is the interaction part and the visual part, right? These two things is where the true creativity of a designer comes out, right? So you have to aid the designer. You have to say, this is what I think as a product manager would be the value proposition from a product layer, right? Now you tell me what is the most aesthetic or the most usable way to essentially do that, right? And that is where you essentially make wireframes for. You don't make wireframes to dictate what you have to be built. You make wireframes to give a sense of the information hierarchy and a value hierarchy to the designer that this is what I believe what the customer wants. And how do you present it in the best possible way? That's your creativity, and I will be supportive there. Yeah.
What transform a PRD from a routine document into something that inspires and aligns the team?
Sure. So I think a lot of people don't give importance to the objective and the background. And I think that plays like a very strong role in the PRD, right? Like I'll give you an example. I was writing a PRD for some product when I was interviewing for this FANG company, right? And it was specifically for education as a product. The intro essentially was that why education is not working the right way, right? What are the proofs around that? What are the two tenets that are really, really important? So you have to the PRD has to talk about two, three things very, very clearly. One, the objective should be damn clear. That what are you trying to achieve, right? Then, if the objective is very clear, you essentially talk about what is the scale, what is the size of the problem, how big is the problem, right? And the third thing is what is your meticulous way and what kind of impact it will have. Now, if that narrative, it's like the narrative of a story. You build the right hook. You say that this is the hook, this is what it will do for you. Like for example, if I tell somebody, oh, you play this game and there's a chance of you winning $1 million, right? And it's a 1/6 chance. Now that's a very powerful hook. You would happily want to play that game. The PRD has to do that. And in one of my sessions I said PRD is the love letter that you write to engineering if you write it perfectly, right? It's like if Shravan is not there, will they be inspired by it? And only those stories inspire in which you can relate, in which you can give value to the person doing it. See, you don't write a PRD specifically only to explain your business case. You also write a PRD to explain that what kind of impact, if engineering solves these problems, will it have, which really ties it back to you. That you are building it. You are the developer who's going to code for it. You are the designer who's going to think for it. You are the sales guy who's going to sell it, right? And then you can essentially quantify it in meaningful way. Oh, I probably helped 100 million people get onboarded on this fintech app, and which allows them to have transactions. Right now, if you go and you say, Shravan, will you become a product manager for UPI as a product or some obscure random product? Right? I'll happily say UPI because the scale is clear, right? The volume is clear, the product experience is clear. That is what a PRD really, where it really stands out, that the narrative is extremely clear. If the narrative is clear, rest all are execution details. There you can make or break things. But if in most PRDs, product managers don't give a lot of importance to the narrative. I give a lot of importance to the narrative. It really inspires people. Yeah.
And what habits can help improve critical thinking in product decisions, and how have you applied them?
Sure. So I think one of the very important habits I have already spoken about, I think constraint writing is a very good way. Constraint writing is an extremely good way because, see, it's the same way I say that, Mahmood, I'll give you $20,000, make me a very good interior in my home, right? And you give Shravan $100,000 to do the same thing. Who will be more creative? It's 100% it's going to be Mahmood who's going to be way more creative, right? So I think that's the first thing that I really tell people to improve their critical thinking, that whenever you write something, right, you ask yourself like, oh, I just have to write it in like 100 words or 200 words, right? Like whenever somebody used to come to an interview, I tell them that write me a PRD about this feature or write me the spec for this feature, but the constraint is it's 100 words. If it goes beyond 100 words, I'm not reading it. The interview is over, right? Now the person has to think, what am I writing? How do I structure it? How do I put it in the most meaningful way? Because if you disuse space, right, you're done. The narrative is over. That's the first thing. The second thing I keep telling people, and again, it's a request to your audience, is that please spend 50 to 60% of your time reading anything and everything, whatever interests you, right? People spend a lot of time reading product books. How do you solve product sense? How do you solve? The world is not just product management fundamentals, it's system dynamics, right? I read anything. So most product management I've learned from Mario. Mario as a game, right? I used to play Age of Empires. I used to play Mario, and it was so fun. I'll give you, Mahmood, I'll give you a very good example. See an example. See, what did Mario do for you, right? You are playing a game and you're moving from left to right, right? But again, it's a constraint. You're only moving from left to right. So it told the user that in order to progress in the game, this is the step that you have to follow. Now that's such a powerful thing to do, right? So the second thing that I keep telling people is read about games, read about generalist stuff, read about just biographies, read about for all that I care, mathematics, music, for all that I care, and just make it actionable. That you learn something, you try that across, right? That's the second thing that I keep telling to improve your be curious. What I mean by curious is the functioning behind anything, how it works. If you find something interesting, spend time out. Like I read a lot of books. A lot of people ask me this question that, Shravan, what is your behavior of reading books, right? Do you read it like one book at a time and then you go to another book? Not really, right? I have like 10 or 12 threads going on at the same time, and I read something like 10 pages a day and say, wow, this is interesting to know, and then I apply that in my lecture or some other place, and then I go back and read another book, then go back and read another book. So I was more recently reading a book on human consciousness, how that evolves, right? It has nothing to do with product management, right? But it typically talks about how people think about life. I read a lot of books on religion, right? Religion is a very important dynamic of people's life, how they behave, how they do things, right? So that's the second thing that I say. Be curious, be horizontal, right? Read anything and everything, spend 50% of the time doing things that you're really interested in, right? And the third thing, and the most critical thing, which people again do, be damn consistent. If you're not consistent, there is no point. If you say that I heard this lecture or I heard this conversation between Mahmood and Shravan, I'll start reading books, you do it for 5 days and you stop again, and then don't do it for 2 months, there's no point. Don't do it, right? So that earnest desire to grow should be an intrinsic drive. And in order to develop it is small steps, small steps. A lot of authors nowadays have done this. So there is this very famous Stoic author called Ryan Holiday. So he now writes books like this. Like there is this book called The Daily Stoic. It's written in such a way that you have to read one page, right? So that even the average reader gets that motivation to do it like the next day also, right? So a lot of people are essentially moving towards the gaming dynamics of education and how it can be transformative to you, right? And I think that's a very good approach. First, constraint writing. Second, be horizontal, read anything that you want that interests you. Go to Medium, take subscriptions, spend money on education. That's really important. And the third thing that I personally feel is be damn consistent. Pick up something, do it for a considerable, considerable period of time, and then make a choice whether it's for you or not. Yeah.
I heard you once talk that people should focus on processes rather than
Yes.
short-term wins. How does this shape long-term success?
Sure. So I think I want to tell you from a very, so there are two ways to look at it. One comes from the very spiritual, philosophical way of kind of talking about it. And the other comes from a like very structured, mechanical system dynamics way of it. So I'll give you an example. So system dynamics typically is the field of understanding complex systems, right? And what I mean by complex system is, for example, Mahmood really wants to go into Google, or he wants to become the CPO of a company. He prepares his heart out, and for 6 months he prepares, he goes, he speaks to the right people, gives 5 interviews, and when the final interview, the person who is going to take that interview has a fight with his wife. And see, you screw up the interview. Now, is it your fault? Not really, right? It's not, right? It just happened, right? That is what system dynamic basically teaches. It says that there are so many hidden variables, right, which really affect the outcome that in no meaningful way you can predict the outcome. You can make tangential guesses around it. It's like predicting the weather. I can tell you what will happen in the next 7 days, but if you ask me what happens in the 10th day, no, I can't. There's a lot of chaos. Chaos is the risk that happens when you've planned for everything. Chaos is the risk which happens when you've planned for everything, the plan B to the B to the B, right? So system dynamics typically says that systems are non-linear. They're counterintuitive, right? So the only thing under your control is the nodal behavior. What's my behavior? Your heart, even if you eat junk food or you don't eat junk food, it beats. It does its work, right? It consistently does that. Similarly, if the only thing under your control are the things under your control, right? Those are the things. So what's the point of thinking about an outcome which you cannot control? Which you cannot control. It's about, like, if you want to prepare for JEE, a lot of people, there's a very famous exam in India called IIT JEE, right? People prepare for it and they prepare 2 years, and there are so many cases where people say we prepared our heart out, but on the judgment day we felt sick, we felt nervous, and we couldn't do it. Now, are you saying that those two years didn't have any merit, where they really invested their heart and soul and everything into it, right? That's not the point. The point is that particular situation, system dynamics tells you that the stock image of that particular time has no meaning. What I mean by that is what is happening in this current juncture is just one snapshot, right? I'll give you another small example around it. I had a small account in college, and it was, my mom used to put money in this bank account. So I said, oh, my mom is a banker. She'll always know how much money I have. So I created an ancillary account, right? Where I used to put like $10 every month and put that in that account, right? $10 like nothing. It was just like, I did that and I forgot about that account, and whatever used to happen, there was a standing instruction that every month 10, 20, $15 will go into it, or sometime $100 or whatever and whatnot. After 8 years, when I looked into that account, it had like $60,000. I was like, wow. I was like, wow, right? Because that one steady state that, oh, it's just has, we are people, we look at our salary, oh, I have only $100 in my bank account. What the hell will I do now? The reality is it's the inflow and the outflow of actions that keeps changing that state. So that is the mechanical way. The philosophical way is that there is this very famous song, the song of life, the song of God, which is written in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, again, the same damn thing. He says that you have, and that's what Sam Altman also tweeted some time back, that you have the right to your actions, but not to the fruits. You have a right to your actions, but not to the fruit. It comes from the same damn principle of the Bhagavad Gita. It comes from system dynamics. There are so many hidden variables, right? But why don't people typically see the world in that way? Because system dynamics is a counterintuitive art. It tells you to appreciate complexity. Whereas we don't. We are people who want more and simple stuff. And it says that if there is a complex system, you have to deal with the hidden forces. There will always be hidden forces, right? And that is where, if you bring that attitude across and say, I don't play a finite game, I play an infinite game. A finite game basically means there is an end outcome, right, to it. But I am playing an infinite game of improvement, improvement, improvement. By very sheer probability, the outcome is going to happen. When it's going to happen, I'm not sure. The last example I want to give is when I started the community, right? I never said that people will have job offers, etc. But after 10 months of running it, teaching so many students, we have 100 plus people cracking PM roles in Meta, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and other places. Did I ever think of it? Not really. It was just that attitude, that earnest improvement in the process. They started loving the process, and it started happening. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Let's say you have a student that was able to land a job in Google and he come from first generation college student and he feel this imposter syndrome being at
Yeah.
Google of someone who didn't grew up in a community where they have studied. What your advice to them?
Sure. So I think the fastest way to deal with imposter syndrome is, again, the thing that I would say is that the only way you can deal with imposter syndrome is by really accepting failure as just one more step in your life. Imposter syndrome is that where you say, "Oh, I achieved something," right? But I'm not sure whether I'm worthy of it. And that's the feeling in your heart. Oh, and if that thing goes away, right, I might not be able to achieve it again. I might not be able to go to Google again, right? Or I might not be able to have that $100,000 job again, right? The funny part is that most of these things are just beliefs. They've never been put to action. That's why I made that quote now, that there is this quote where this person says that I have a lot of problems in my life, but they're all in my head. so so the fastest way to break imposter syndrome is go out and ship something out and get feedback. And if you get feedback, whether it is good, there is nothing called good and bad feedback, Mahmood. There is only actionable or non-actionable feedback. Can I do something with it? People come to me, Shravan, you did not teach design, apne acha nahi padhaya. You didn't teach design well, right? You didn't teach design well. Then I ask them, what do you mean by that? Most of the times they don't have an answer. It's just a view. But if somebody comes and says, "Oh, you did not teach the principles of color theory very well. I did not understand how the principle of contrast really works. Now I have something actionable to work on," right? That is and if you really feel afraid, and then people say, "But, bhaiya, what if it's a huge thing?" Then you have to develop the ability to break it down into smaller things. Like, I'll give an example. Somebody tells me, "Bhaiya, I don't have those many followers that I reach out to anybody and they respond back," right? You probably have. Fair enough, no problems, right? Can you start working towards that, saying that my next task was just writing tomorrow? And you write tomorrow, right? And then you get good or bad feedback, whatever on it. At least this is such a small, trivial thing. It does not change anything in your life. At least there you can even if you get rejected, it's completely okay. Yeah, that is completely okay. Do it for 6 months. You'll see the value yourself, right? After 6 months, your level of assessing feedback, taking criticism, not having ego, it will improve. So if you don't ship, most people have imposter syndrome because they don't ship out something, they only speak. That is the problem. Trust me, ship out something, however bad it is. Yeah.
I feel called out because this was the main reason why I had imposter syndrome for a long time when I first started the job. So thank you so much for saying that. How do you show genuine empathy for engineers, designers, and other stakeholders?
Sure. So I think again a very good question. So you're asking very nice questions today, actually. So the thing is, empathy, a lot of people say it's a very glorified word. It sounds very cool, right? Like you're empathetic, right? Empathy is, see, in my definition, empathy is how you behave when you have no incentive, when you have absolutely no incentive. If you are a great human there, you'll automatically make good relationships. Most people don't work like that. There is some incentive. You work with a dev because you want to ship out something, right? You work with a designer because you want to prove to the business that I improved these metrics. Give me the raise, give me the next promotion that I want, give me a larger team, give me more stocks, right? But the reality is that most people or most leaders, great leaders, operate in giving advice, right, when there is absolutely zero incentive. They have zero incentive. And I'll give you a very good example. Like for example, if somebody you go in an interview, and like whenever somebody goes in an interview, at least I try to do that. The first thing that I ensure is that I show my face. I talk about what he has done. Are you feeling okay? Don't feel afraid. I'm your friend. Forget who Shravan is. Forget who you're talking to. Just have a candid. Then I typically use colloquial lingo in Hindi and say that, oh, bro, this is absolutely okay. We are just two smart people trying to solve a problem and things like that, right? So you make the other person comfortable in such a situation, and then the person will open his heart, right? For me, humor works, right? Humor is a very, very deal breaker for me. Like I'll write funny stuff and they'll say, oh wow, if this guy is also writing funny stuff, why should I be afraid? Why should I? And I think that's where really good observational comedy comes in, and I'm a huge fan of Jerry Seinfeld, right? So observational comedy typically tells you to humorize yourself, right? And that's the fastest way to show empathy, right? That you are saying that it's absolutely okay, it's absolutely okay, there's no judgment, right? So if you really want to empathize with a dev, right? Most people typically say, and again, a very controversial opinion, most people say that you should keep your personal and professional lives separate. And that's a very fair view, right? But the reality is, if you really want to build loyalty and trust, you have to go into their personal lives. You should know what are the boundaries or not your boundaries. You cannot go inside their private life with their wife or XYZ or whatever. But you have to build that personal connect. Then only there will come a time when you really, or they need you or you need them, and you will go out of your way to essentially help the other person. So whenever I meet like a dev or something, in most cases it's about what did you do the last weekend, appreciating something about the dev. Oh wow, you're a cool person, man. Love to hang out with you and things like that. So if you do that, right, then there comes a moment, and one fine day, even if I'm a director of product, the dev will come and say, Shravan, ye phat jayega. This will break. This will break. I'm telling you. If you don't do that, he'll say that he's like 7 levels above me or 5 levels above me. Why the hell should I go and speak to this person? It's his problem, right? So I think try to see people's behaviors when they have absolutely zero incentive, and that will give you a very good understanding of the culture of the company. What is the type of culture that you want to be in? And if you are in a culture where people are generally supported, they are generally said good things, they're given opportunities, they're not bent on failures, right? They're giving accountability the right way. I think it's a very good way, very, very empathetic place that you want to be in. Yeah.
Let's say a product manager start working in a small startup. How can they maintain autonomy and trust when a founder's thought becomes heavily involved in product details?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think this again comes from the fact that how well are you able to break abstraction? What I mean by that is, like for example, most founders, there is this thing called in like military, it's called the commander's intent, right? So I'll give you an example. There are two very good quotes. The first quote is that all plans fails when you get punched in the face. All plans fail, right? So plans never go out of execution. That's the tenet of system dynamics, right? Systems are counterintuitive. But what is clear is generally the intent, that this is my intent, this is what I want to achieve. I want to achieve NPS of like 95 or whatever. I want to really achieve something in which the most of my or 50% of my customers are saying that it really changed something meaningful for me. Now that's an intent, right? Product managers should be able to break this commander's intent into actionable steps. That, okay, if I want to really understand who is a good customer for me, define that persona very well and say that, okay, this is what I take as good or bad. So break down that commander's intent into actionable way of measuring stuff, right? And if you're able to do that, you have to be okay with the cons also, that this might not be the most perfect way to do it, but still, if you can break this abstraction into like actionable ways of measuring stuff, right? Like for example, I say that rethink systems allows people or me in general to allows build a community which is focused on trust, abundance mindset and things like that, right? Now, how do I measure it? One of the very good ways is see what is the typical structures of autonomous groups in the community which are working on their own. Very good way of looking at it. Why are they working? They don't have any interaction. Second, how many people are really supporting each other on LinkedIn as a community? What is the general average engagement rate of people in the community and what kind of lift that you've got? Very good way of looking at it, right? Third, right, how many referrals are organically happening where Shravan is not involved at all, right? Very good way of looking at it. So I think that is a very, very important way where you essentially say that if a founder is heavily involved, show them the merit that this is what I'm measuring and this is how it makes sense. If you go, a lot of people ask me this very same question in a different way. They say, I work in a service based company, everything is very, very structured, there cannot happen, and my manager does not agree for me to essentially go there. What do? I tell them, did you make a proposal? Did you make a proposal for them that is very meaningful to their cause? Now if you go to your manager and say, this saves me $1 million and I can prove it to you, he'll be an idiot to not to do it. He'll happily tell you to do it. The problem is you have not broken down that abstraction into something that he or she can tangibly look at and say, oh, this is what I do. This is what I essentially come across. Like, why should I make a sitemap for my website? Why should I even do it? What impact does it have on the customer? The answer to this is it helps you boost your SEO traffic maybe by 2% or 3%. Now that is meaningful. That you can quantify in. So every damn thing you can really quantify that across, and that is where the true skill of a product manager kind of comes in. Yeah.
Now, as AI start to automate routine tasks, what human qualities keep PMs indispensable?
Sure. So I think the one thing that again I would repeat Jensen Huang here. He said, AI is not going to replace you. It's the person who is using AI which is going to replace you in the most meaningful way. See, the thing is that it's a great thing that AI is able to do a lot of good tasks, right? A lot of automation, which is very, very cool. And they're becoming better at reasoning itself, right? But I think there are certain things which you will be able to look at it in a very meaningful way. One is the emotional side of it, the empathetic side of it. That is still not, we are not there. Maybe in 20 years, they figure out how to simulate emotions also. I'm not sure, but not right now. That comes out as a very, very powerful thing that you should really, really leverage. That how do you build very strong trust into building a team of people who use AI very well? That's one. Second, it allows you a lot of things to do better discovery. So if you are very good with AI, you can automate a bunch of stuff, right? You can automate a bunch of, like, I'll give you a good example of this, right? So I was talking to this deep SaaS startup, and what they essentially do is they know that the general behavior of a PM is that the PM is involved in so many Telegram groups in India, then WhatsApp groups, in Slack, in so many places, and the data threads are like endless. They're in every dimension, right? And you don't really remember that, oh, on this thread what was happening and what was not happening. So what they essentially did is they fed data, or they fine-tuned data of like 50-60 major companies and figured out what are the behavioral patterns of how PMs typically do data sharing, right? And they built a data layer, an AI layer on top of, or a model on top of, which they call MEX. So what it typically does is I go to GPT, I write something meaningful out of it, and then essentially say, MEX, now send it to the right people who essentially want to read them. And MEX automatically understands that and sends it to the right people on Slack, on email, on other places. Now this AI would do very, very well. So what it allowed me to do is take away those 2 hours which I had to specifically send on Slack, put it in a PRD, put it in a Notion or something like that. They went away. So I spent those 2 hours on having better critical conversations. So it helps you in discovery. That's the second thing. And the third thing, I think, which is the most damn powerful thing of AI, it now really makes you a generalist. I'm dropping a bomb today. I'm saying the role product manager might not exist in its title after 10 years. The role will become, are you a generalist? Because now product managers can do engineering, engineers can think like a product manager, a designer can think like an engineer, because it is becoming so good, right? That now if you have to really test out your idea after doing discovery, I would not be surprised in 5 years you find a one-person billion-dollar company. I would not be surprised. This is what AI is doing you. So it's helping you do the complete life cycle, the complete system. You're not just a product manager. You're writing a PRD and giving thesis and giving matrices. You're actually shipping that thing out, right? And that's such a point. And in the Intercom CEO in one of the in 20 VC, I think that was the podcast. He said that AGI is the death of SaaS. So yeah. So if you think like that, so I think 3 things. One, the human elements, I think that will always remain, right? Where you will be able to leverage people. If you build very strong cultural dynamics, you'll be able to leverage people who leverage AI very well. Second thing is, I think it gives you a lot of flexibility to do better discovery as a PM, really look into the problem space way more deeply and understand the insights over there. And the third thing is the shipping capabilities are like insane, man. Well, like you can just ship out stuff and test it out tomorrow if you have decent distribution. Distribution first businesses are like the future. Yeah. Yeah.
And why do you think that core focusing on core values and fundamentals matter more than quick hacks in product management?
Sure. Yeah. This is again a very philosophical question, but I'll tell you why. See, what is your value system? Value system basic. There are two types of values that I kind of talk about. There are higher values and there are lower values, right? Higher values basically means which define the definition of the self, that this is who I am, right? Like for example, I would say, oh, Shravan is a funny guy. So humor is an attribute of Shravan that happens in every situation, right? No matter whether he's doing product management, whether he's sitting with his friends, whether he's chilling out somewhere, whether he's having a beer or whatever the hell he's doing, whether he's reading a book, right? So that is a general sense, right? That comes across, right? So if your core values are like resilience is a core value, right? What it does for you, resilience basically means it's okay, let's fight again, let's fight again, right? If you have that kind of an attitude where you learn, or if you have that attitude where you say, no, one of my core values is that learning from everything, right? Have that ability, have that empathy, have that less ego. What will happen is that one fine day, let's assume Mahmood and Shravan went to Google for an interview, right? Both failed, right? Now Mahmood is not resilient. He's not. And he just cribs over it, cries over it, forgets it, said it's not for me, it's not something that I'll do. But Shravan, he has a beer one day, cries over and starts working hard again from the next day. 6 months down the line, again some opportunity happens and both of us again go to Google. Who do you think will be successful? It's the person who really thought of that is just a small thing. So that is why if you inculcate values where you say, don't be afraid of failure, don't be afraid of judgment, right? It's absolutely okay, it's a safe place, right, where you can do such things, right? Then you start to rechange the wiring in a person's mind. And if that wiring changes, right, then you really know that success is just some parts away. This is such a nice story. So one of my students, he used to work for Google for sales for 10 years, and Google kind of rejected him like 3-4 times, right? That you are in sales, you would not move into product and stuff like that. He spent 10 years, he was in the Valley area, right? So, and he spent like $6,000 on a program, right? Already in the US on learning product and stuff like that, but he couldn't. And do you know what happened? When he came into our program, he realized that, oh, this guy is so sunky, he's so crazy that he's teaching Bhagavad Gita in product management lectures. What the hell is he doing? Right? And over time, after my second batch went over, he had a kid and everything. He comes to me one day and he says, Sean, I cracked the role in Facebook. I'm joining Facebook. And I was like, wow. He said, Sean, this is the life-changing moment of my life. I realized that I never tried. And I was always under this shell. And now when I said, oh, what will happen? Right? Nothing will happen. Kya hoga yaar? I am already good enough. I'll get a sales job somewhere else. It's absolutely okay. I work for Google. And he tried again. He failed once, twice, thrice. And after 3 years of trying, he cracks a role in Facebook in 3 months. Now that is special. That is special. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. This is something that you do very well. How do you foster a community with a strong values, intent, and long-lasting engagement?
Sure. I think the answer to this question is practice what you preach. That's as simple as that. If you are the emulation of what you speak, if I don't write, why do I expect my students to write? If I don't teach, why do I expect my students? Like, I'll give you another example. My students told me that it's the future AI and can you teach us how LLMs really work, right? And I just spent like two weeks. I was traveling. I still spent 2 weeks, made a lecture, did that lecture. And now that is something that people take away. They see it, that very powerful, that wow, he said something. We said it only in a way that Shravan, you are anyway teaching us. Why don't you teach us? But he genuinely put an effort to it. He went away and he did it, right? And that is, so there is a very nice book, Mexican book, where they talk about the book's name is The Four Agreements, right? So The last agreement is in the book is do what you say. If you're not doing it, you'll never build trust. And that is what happens, right? If you're not empathetic, if you're not practicing what you're essentially saying, people are not dumb. They see through the garb, right? If you can behave consistently in a way where you don't judge somebody, you really allow the person to say things, right? Simultaneously, you don't make assumptions about people, and in the end, do your work perfectly. Always give your 100%, right? And do it perfectly, right? Whatever it is, right? I think that is where true community gets built into, where people start realizing, oh wow, people don't do that. People are generally about external outcomes, right? Oh, the next job, the next salary, that's great, but they don't really realize that it is a function of your internal values that really bring those stuff to you, right? And that is why even after, like, I've seen people with 15 years of 20 years of experience, they say that we still have imposter syndrome, which is completely okay, right? Matlab, I am completely okay having imposter syndrome, but the only way to solve it is go and fail. It's absolutely okay. Go and fail and learn again and try it again. That's it. Yeah.
Let me ask you this: why most of your audience, or mainly your students, they always call you Bhaiya as a non-Indian? What do they mean?
Sure. So I think Bhaiya is a very nice way of saying that you are their elder brother, right? And Bhaiya is how you call across that. And the reason that I wanted myself to be called Bhaiya was because I never wanted to see me in any way an influencer or whatever and whatnot. I really wanted them to see me as an educator, as a teacher, as a friend of theirs, right? And that is the reason it's a kind of initially self-given lingo to myself. I started writing Shravan Bhaiya, but it kind of stuck. It stuck with people and it resonated with them. They started loving it, and then I got it responses that it's so nice to speak to somebody where I can open my heart and say. I have had stories which are so moving where people have said that this inspired me to really leave my. So I still remember this story. It was like 3-4 years back. There was this girl who was about to get married in, like, to a place where she couldn't crack a project manager role, and her parents wanted her to get married and she didn't want to. She watched a video, she reached out, and in 3-4 months, and she went to Germany, right? And she didn't have to marry, and it was so powerful. I was like, wow, I never. And then she messages me one fine day and he says that I might have never spoken to you, but whenever I listened to you, it felt like my elder brother is guiding me. And that came from the very fact because you wrote Bhaiya in your post. And I said, who is this guy who's calling himself Bhaiya? Who's calling himself Bhaiya? And she went and she actually watched a video. So I think we humans, we are very afraid. We live in a very dog eat dog kind of a world where we think so, right? But again, it's okay to get your heart broken, because when hearts break, then you become wiser, and when you become wiser, you choose very succinctly and say that this is who I want, this is who I don't want. I think, and a lot of people ask me, see, we probably live 70, 75 years in the best case scenario, maybe in a very best year, maybe 100 years in that scenario. But you have to realize that it's in life, it is not really about how many successes or failures do you really have. In life, it is more about how much did you enjoy the journey, right? Because when death is like at your bottom, and you ask yourself, when you remember, oh, for 60 years I cribbed, this thing happened, you will be very sad at yourself. So it's better that you accept this fact that heartbreaks are okay in life. They're anyway going to happen, because if there won't be 5 heartbreaks, how do I find a friend like Mahmood? How do I do that? Right? How do I find a friend? Because it's the jewels you only find when you go through enough shit. And then you say, oh wow, this is the jewel. This is I want to stay. This is what I want to take away. You respect everybody in life, but you don't admire people. But so if you really want to gain people's admiration, live in their hearts. Yeah.
Shravan, you started as a teacher, then you worked in Byju's, one of the biggest edtech in the world. Now you're back as a teacher. Why teaching so important for you?
I think people have kind of forgotten that education is really transformative. It changes people, right?
This is my
Every
favorite quote of yours, by the way.
that is so true, because so again, there is this theory called Adam 1 and Adam 2. We have two Adam apples. We don't have like just one. Adam 1 is the materialistic one who says that next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing, right? But the Adam 2, why do you believe that people, when they were in the 1900s or 1800s, when there was not a lot of technology, they were like super happy? They were like, there was not a lot of depression, there was not a lot of problems like that in the world. The reason was because they understood their aspect where they understood that this is enough, this is good, this gives me content, right? It tells me that there is something to learn from everybody, right? There is always somebody better than me. But unfortunately, as wealth kind of started growing in, people started, oh wow, my standard of life is improving and etc., and they said, oh, the next thing probably makes me more happy. But that really doesn't happen, right? So it is really important that education not only teaches you your strengths, but it also teaches you that vulnerabilities are also strengths. It's completely okay to be vulnerable. It's completely okay to be authentic. You don't have to emulate people. You don't have to become another Shravan. You have to be the best version of Mahmood. That's how it is, right? And that is where true lasting relationships happen. And true education changes you at the part of where you're, where you see. There is a very nice thing called dharma. Dharma basically means righteous action. So let's not go into the philosophical or the spiritual part of it, but it really means righteous action, right? Righteous action basically means that my education should enable me to do something meaningful in the interest of the system. And if it is doing something meaningful in the interest of the system will ensure that it does something meaningful to me. That is how it works. Like if you call your mother and you say that, oh mom, I love you, right? A lot of people tell me that oh, I left college, I told my friends that I'll be in touch, but I was never in touch, and then I expect. So a man of action is way more valuable than a man of knowledge. So you have to become a man of action, because actions are which essentially give you that experience to really see, internalize education and say that, oh wow, this is why I should be humble. This is why it allows me to do a lot of things, right? So the final thing that the reason I became a teacher was that in some meaningful way, if I can still tell people to focus there, that part where that makes you a better person, right? Rest of the things of becoming a better operator, better product manager, better designer, or whatever the hell you want to become, that's going to happen. That's anyway going to happen. So I think that was my motivation to speak whatever little I have been doing here.
Man, Shravan, thank you so much. That's such an exciting episode. We reached the end of the episode. I know we only scratched the surface here about product management, where our audience can find you, they can find your courses. I know that you are building your startup, which is very exciting. We're gonna definitely have a part two when you come here into Dubai. We're gonna talk about the problem, the product market fit. But there's anything want to share to end the episode with?
Sure. I think the last thing that I want to tell everybody, and again, it's a very close quote in my heart, right? And the quote is that the wise man, right, does allow wealth into his home, but does not allow wealth into his heart, right? He takes what is his, but does not mull over what is not his, right? And he makes wealth only to practice his virtue. That what is his virtue, what are the good things that he can do in society, right? People don't remember you that in the ways that you essentially said a bad word, but they will always remember how you treat them. So if you really want to become a very good product manager, if you really want, try to first emulate and look inside, right? And say that, see, Rumi said this last thing, and again it's a Rumi quote, that yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I want to change myself. So I think the change begins with you. Where whatever you want to learn, see that is it changing you? If it changes you, it will automatically change people around you, right? So I think that's where I want people to kind of stand back. I know this episode has been slightly more philosophical, but yeah, but these are important things that have to go out in the world, because everything meaningful which has to be said has already been said. But since nobody listened, so we are talking about them again.